something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
We, the people, tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We, the people, are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go and by what route to do. We, the people, are free. And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited.
G'day, beautiful people. How are you this very fine one? Have you had a good day? I trust you've been rolling around, not getting too sunburned or too wet, depending on where you are in your part of the world. And if you're in far north Queensland, you'll be preparing to get very wet. We'll talk about the cyclone that's heading that way shortly. I think it's going to be in far north Queensland. It's likely to come across the coast at this stage, north of Cooktown. So thankfully, fairly sparsely populated, although there are some settlements out there. It's probably the narrowest part of Australia that this thing can cross. It'll cross the tip and probably wind up into the other Gulf and make its way over to the Northern Territory, where it'll run into a few more settlements, likely to cause a bit more havoc. But we'll keep appraised of that as the weekend nears. They're expecting it to be quite a brutal force as it comes across, a Category 4 or even 5. But as I say, it'll be in a very sparsely populated area. If you're going four-wheel driving, I don't know that I'd be doing that up there at the moment. You're probably going to need a helicopter to get you out. A lot of things happening in South Australia. G'day to all our South Australian viewers, and thank you to the great feedback that we're getting because we are covering what's going on in South Australia with the election. When I say we, I probably mean Vince more so than me. He's been trying to interview as many candidates as possible and is making a bit of an impact. The candidates are now ringing him and thanking him for it too. They're obviously getting feedback. So South Australians, I urge you to go to the FBN Media page on YouTube and check out the series of interviews that Vince has done with South Australian candidates. And he informs me just before, and this is going to get confusing because I haven't got pictures to illustrate with, but he informs me just before I came to air that in the upper house or the Legislative Assembly in South Australia, it's okay to just vote one above the line. So in the case of, let's call it One Nation, you want to vote for One Nation in the upper house where there are 4, I think, candidates for One Nation running, Corey Bernardi being one of them. If you vote One Nation, that vote will only go to One Nation. There is no preferencing of that vote down to anybody else. And that works for all parties in that Legislative Assembly. As we pointed out last night in the lower house, One Nation have decided not to show you which way they'd like you to preference. They want you to figure that out yourself. And so their how to vote card simply says, vote One Nation, whatever the One Nation candidate is, and then you fill out the rest. Now, there might be 3, 4, 5, 6 candidates in your particular seat. If there are 3, 4, 5, or 6, you've got to put 3, 4, 5, or 6 in those in the order of preference that you have for those candidates. But as long as you start with number 1 in One Nation's box, I'm sure they will be very happy. Big polls have come out today in South Australia suggesting that One Nation has clawed more back from the South Australian government, although Malinaskis is in no way, shape or form going to lose this election. And by the sounds of it, his seat is in a very strong Labor area. He's not likely to lose that either. However, a number of other ministers who have probably felt themselves protected are going to be in for quite a shake if these poll numbers come through. And these poll numbers are being echoed across the nation. So this weekend in South Australia is a very important event for South Australians, but I would go so far as to say that this weekend's election in South Australia is going to have ramifications right across the country in the short term for the next 7 weeks. In the long term, if they get another result in 7 weeks that backs up the support One Nation appears to be getting in South Australia, this will put a rocket of enormous suppository proportions up the jacksies of the Liberal, National, Labor, Greens, unibrow consortium. And then you will see the gloves come off in a very big way. They will be trying to attack not just Pauline, but they will be attacking everybody who's going to stand in all of the seats, I suspect, available in the country. I think One Nation may well just stand everybody up in the lower house and for the Senate. Could be very interesting. So this means a great deal this weekend. It's would consider that to be a phenomenal win. If they come away with more than that, then I think that the major parties are going to be requiring to well, they may well need hospital attention to stitch up their arseholes. They're going to shit that badly because it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess. Particularly if the feeling that I'm hearing from South Australians generally is what's going to happen. Quite often we find, and this is why I pay never really much attention to polls, but quite often we find, particularly in One Nation's case, as it turns out, they poll very, very, very strongly. And then people get to the polling booth where they're meant to write up their vote, and for some reason they swap. So I don't know if that's been a concerted effort in the past, a tactic by the Liberal and Labor parties to boost up that supposed polling data and then have it all collapse on One Nation, which must be very disheartening for them every election. I don't think that's happening this time round. I think the support for One Nation is significant, very significant. And, if you're up for voting, you might be up for that kind of a change. All power to you. You might want to be thinking about who you're going to be voting in and where they stand on things like personal space invasion, so to speak. You'll all be very familiar and probably used on numerous occasions Google Earth or Google Maps. But Google Earth particularly is a very interesting app that's available from the Google Suite, where you can access satellite data. It's not real time. It's images that have been taken over days, weeks, and months previous and stitched together. But it'll give you a pretty good look around the world, except at the places where you aren't allowed to see. They put artificial blurring over certain things. So if you're ever wondering while you're looking at Google Earth why a certain area won't, come into shot and focus properly, that's why. There's something sensitive under there that Google don't want you to see, or the people who own it don't want you to see. However, that clearly doesn't extend to your personal space. Now, I was talking to Pete from Pinaroo, who has a penchant for wishing to purchase old jalopies, and he does them up and repurposes them, or just does them up and sells them off to somebody who likes old jalopies. Now, a while ago, he found, through an old farmer, a literal barn find, he found a Corolla. Now, that Corolla had in it a lot of the things that he needed to help restore the Corolla that he was working on. One of those being the steering column and a few other bits and pieces out of it. This was on a farmer's property, this vehicle, and all the land for miles around it was owned by the farmer. So for somebody to come onto the property and pull the steering column out of it, pull all the wiring out of it, clearly they're looking for scrap, and they left some of the more valuable items. Now, you and I might look at this and see, what a bit of junk. But there are certain things when you're looking to do these cars up, and these were very, very popular little Corollas, I can tell you. Things like the petrol cap there, worth a lot of money. The tail lights, original tail lights, the thieves didn't take them. They did pull all the wiring out of the lights and the looms and all that sort of stuff. And the steering column. I mean, that must have taken some work. Now, these buggers have come onto this property and known exactly where to go. How exactly? Oh, they got out on Google Earth, identified what's where and why, and have turned up. Now, there have been reports that the Google Street by nefarious types to identify houses or areas that might be worth more investigation when it comes to robbing. This might be coming in, breaking into your house and robbing your house, or more likely, as is the case these days in Melbourne and Sydney, they want your car. So if that Google vehicle happens to have gone past while you've had a pretty flash car in your driveway, it doesn't matter if it was yours or not, odds are your place is going to get a drive-by just to see what sort of car you park in the driveway at night and whether or not it's worth any money to them. And at the moment, there is a lot of big money to be had in car parts. But is there a lot of money to be had in, well, they stripped out the steering column, the fuel tanks, the seats, all the wiring, because there's still a bit of copper left in the wiring. Anything they could actually unbolt, they pulled out of that car and made off with it. And the farmer never knew about it. Pete's turned up to go and pick the thing up and bring it home and discovered all these bits missing. Now, how do they, do we all blame Google always? No, not always, because the council also have access to an app, and we're very familiar with that app. If you've lived on property and you've knocked trees over, you'll be very, very familiar with that app. Now, they pay a good lot of money so that their EPA or their council bylaws inspector can have a look and compare what your block looks like 6 months apart from satellite view. And if they see any new lines on the map, any new straight lines or any trees knocked down or clearings made or new buildings put up, then that's how you wind up getting a knock on the door with a council compliance officer who is going to make sure that you have paid the appropriate fee, not necessarily that what you're doing is right, wrong, or indifferent, just that you've paid the appropriate fee. Now, could council, well, I know council do employ some nefarious types from time to time. Would it pay off if you had, I don't know, union-controlled influence or bikie-controlled influence in your council, and they were able to get access to those sorts of photos that are very detailed, and you can zoom in on and see exactly what is on a rural property and exactly where it is in relation to other things. Tim's saying drones. Well, yes, you run the risk of being heard with a drone, and if you're going to be a criminal overflying somebody else's place with a drone, you're going to run that risk of being discovered. You're probably going to want your drone to come back to you, unless you plan on just letting it hike off into the distance and you're going to go and steal another one down the track. Drones are great, but they're noisy. So even at 400 feet, which is the maximum height you're meant to have them, and with the cameras they've got on them at 400 feet, you're not picking up a great deal of detail on the ground. So you're going to be lower, and even the little ones are going to make a noise. In fact, we'll have a little unboxing of a drone in, I don't know, a week or so's time. Somebody has sent me one, which is very generous of them. And don't get too carried away. It's a very tiny drone, but we'll have an unboxing of it. It has a camera on it. We'll see what sort of camera it is. And who knows, you might get lots of video of me walking around. Won't that be fun? You won't get lots of video because I don't do a lot of walking around, but that's a whole other story. We won't get into that. All right, moving on to other things for the day. Keep an eye out if you've got old vehicles that could be worth things, could be worth money, even to a scrapper. If you've got them on your property, you might want to throw tarps over it or something, because I don't trust these bastards one iota. Councils, made up of people, and we've proved quite a lot of them are quite chonky, so just be aware. All right. Turns out the Australian Navy is rather unhappy with the Australian government. Who knew? For so long, we've had sycophants sitting at the top of the Australian Defence Force leadership pyramid, and definitely is a pyramid. And I'm not completely sure that we've had anybody from Navy, or at least anybody who was a career Navy person representing Navy at that level. It doesn't appear that we have anybody representing Navy at the moment that has balls. And I include those female officers that are probably leading the Navy at the moment. To lead the Navy, you're going to want some balls, so to speak. They have single-handedly, along with the government, been responsible for the greatest deflation of morale in modern naval history. Sailors, current serving sailors, men and women, are all very willing to share, well, maybe not they're all. Many of them are willing to share their opinion quietly because they get into trouble if they share it publicly and use their names. So I'm not going to get anybody into trouble. However, I can tell you that the morale in the Navy is nosediving. And why is that? Because we have two complete morons. Well, we've got a lot more than that, but two complete morons sitting at the top table in our government who recently, at a time when Australia had 3 sailors on board a nuclear submarine that was involved in an action during wartime against an enemy combatant ship. Yes, I know the ship had a lot of things going for it at the time, and whether it should have been blown up or not, that isn't the argument. The point I'm making is, for the first time since World War II, an American submarine has fired a torpedo on a boat and sunk it. And this is a nuclear submarine that had 3 Australian sailors on it who are doing training. What sort of training? These won't be, little seaman type sailors. These will be officers on board learning how to command a nuclear submarine. They will be learning the systems. I would say one would be an engineer, one would be a command captain, and one would be an XO or along those lines. One would probably be a weapons specialist, and the captain is meant to be all things to all people. There won't be 2 captains on the boat, but there will be a seniority thing there. But our sailors, nope, you don't get to participate because somewhere in Canberra, Albo, Sleazy, and that Muppet Marles get on the phone with Penny Wong and wet themselves over the fact that Australians might be on board a boat that's going to fire a torpedo that it was designed to fire for the first time since World War II in an active war zone. And he sends them to their bunks, quite literally to their bunks. You will go to your bunk, you will pull the curtain closed, you will turn up your radio, put your fingers in your ears, go la, 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 hear no, see no, do no evil. You can't be blamed. We can't be blamed for being part of this if you weren't standing on the bridge or doing whatever. These 3, I suspect, officers are not there as observers. They are there as active members of crew. They will have been trained or are in the middle of training so that they can learn and bring those skills back to Australia at the time the Americans ordain us to be brave enough, big enough, and responsible enough to inherit one of their 40-year-old nuclear submarines. And then we're going to spend another 20 years trying to build our own. But that's another point. A moot point. What we've got is a coward's government issuing orders where they must have gone to the secret squirrel bat phone, relayed through diplomatic terms, because I'd be very surprised indeed if Anthony Albanese can pick up a phone in Canberra and, using the very low frequencies that they use to contact submarines, ring up the USS Charlotte and say, listen, I want to talk to the Aussies on board, mate. Thanks. Don't think it works like that. It would have had to have gone through CENTCOM. It would have gone diplomatically before that. Whole heap of shit. And if we get into trouble, you will go to bed. You will put your fingers in your ears. You will not see, hear, or do anything because the Australian government doesn't want you to know about it. Do you really think America is going to give us, regardless how much money, and I think we're up to over $400 billion in the deal now, Do you really think America is going to give us nuclear submarines if they can't trust the Australian government to support them at a time where they supposedly need it? And that is what Donald Trump is arguing about in the here and now. He's a very angry little man. The United States has been informed by most of our NATO allies that they don't want to get involved with our military operation against the terrorist regime of Iran in the Middle East. This, despite the fact that almost every country strongly agreed with what we're doing. I don't think every country was asked or even told what they were doing before they went and did it. Sorry, that's by the by. And that Iran cannot, in any way, shape, or form, be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. I am not surprised by their action, however, because I always considered NATO where we spent hundreds of billions of dollars per year protecting these same countries to be a one-way street. We will protect them, but they will do nothing for us, in particular, in a time of need. Fortunately, we have decimated Iran's military. Their navy is gone, their air force is gone, their anti-aircraft and their radar is gone, and perhaps most importantly, their leaders, virtually every level, are also gone, never to threaten us, our Middle Eastern allies, or the world again. Because of that fact that we have had so much military success, we no longer need or desire the NATO countries' assistance. We never did. Likewise, Japan, Australia, or South Korea. In fact, speaking as President of the United States of America, by far the most powerful country of anyone, anywhere in the world, we do not need the help of anyone. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I think he was a bit angry at the end there. Do you think that? I would just caution the president that pride cometh before the fall. My nanny used to say that, maybe because I was a prideful little turd and needed to be brought down a few rungs, quite probably. But if that is the case, maybe that's how it should be leveled here at the Don. He has got very angry that multiple nations, including Australia, have refused to send a warship into the Straits of Hormuz to protect shipping. What's happened to all the insurance that the Americans were going to provide for all the shipping? There shouldn't be any problems with that, yada, 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 yada. Doesn't appear like too many ships have taken them up on that offer, or owners of those ships have taken them up on that offer. And that could be because they have no real faith in the American dollar. Now, just how invincible, just how good, and will it still be the best country in the world when the US dollar crashes and is worth nothing? And that's where it's going. Make no mistake, it's going to crash to nothing. Will America still be the greatest country in the world? Will it even be a country still? I doubt it. Netanyahu is the worst president the United States have ever had. I like that. And you'd be right. Now, all sorts of weird things coming out about the war in Iran and the damage that's being caused in Israel. So at the moment, in this particular area of the Straits of Hormuz, the Americans have been concentrating fire, so to speak. This area is the area of regard where missiles have been put into those launch facilities, underground launch facilities that I showed you pictures of the other night, and waiting for shipping to come through. They're going to identify American ships or American-owned ships or ships with American interests, and those missile silos have anti-ship missiles loaded in them, meaning they travel very fast, very low, and because they only have a very short distance to travel comparatively from where they're launched to where any ship might be, and by short, I mean the maximum distance they're going to travel is 26 miles, really, there isn't a lot of time to get into position to protect shipping and bring these things down. We've also been made aware that Iran has been producing and keeping hidden fleets, and we're talking hundreds of these fast attack boats capable of missile launches, harpoon missile launches, anti-ship missiles. Now, if that's true, that would indicate why America today has been going out and doing its damnedest with the biggest bombs they have in their arsenal. And they've been bombing that entire coastline, both along the coast and just inland from it. They've been using 5,000 pound, so what's that, 2,500 more kilo explosives. And that would be rocking the world of anybody who is close by. These are deep bunker penetrating weapons that are supposedly going to annihilate Iran's ability to knock out the shipping. I don't know that that's going to really help. I think they're going to have some serious issues convincing these ship owners to come back in. There are a couple of burning boats already inside the Gulf. I'm not sure if they've been able to put out the container ship that was on fire, and certainly the two oil ships up near Iraq were still well alight yesterday. I'm not sure if they've been able to put them out yet or not. Interestingly, though, very little damage, which, to the environmental damage, which goes to show that at least it appears that in the most highly oiled part of the world, they're very ready for these sorts of environmental issues of a ship springing a leak or blowing up unexpectedly and leaving parts of itself all over the place. What you won't find anywhere in that Gulf is a submarine protecting shipping. It's too shallow, too narrow, and they make too much of a nice target going into and out of the Straits of Hormuz. And I don't think they'd like to be in there with all the other big ships moving around on them anyway. They will be hanging around outside of it, somewhere off India. And India at the moment is where peace negotiations appear to be having a fledgling beginning. Donald Trump, as you can see, is just being rather bombastic and not happy with ending the war just yet. He says, or has said previously, that Iran has asked multiple times for them to end the war. We've seen anything but that. The Iranian leadership have been quite vocal in pushing back, and so too have many of the Iranian people. We are only being shown certain protests out of Iran, but there are much larger protests in support of the government that is now under attack, which is having a bad week. What can we say? Now, we've learned that Mutaba is going to be the son of the old Ayatollah is going to be the new Ayatollah, Mutaba Khomeini. Now, there are a lot of stories about him that he's dead, that he's wounded, very badly wounded, only got one leg left, got no legs left. I've heard that too. Does still seem to be able to write, so presumably he's got his good hands still. No one knows whether or not he's still in Iran, but everybody is pretty confident he hasn't been able to get out of it. He spent some time in a coma. But now they are really ramping it up. Now, we talked a bit about propaganda last night. So the Ayatollah's son was apparently colloquially known in Iran as the power behind the robe. Now, that sounds very daunting when you think of him as the son of the Ayatollah who ruled with an iron fist. But the Ayatollah the old Ayatollah was a bit perplexed and was concerned about putting this son up for the job when he either retired or was retired by the Israelis. He had some concerns. And it appears, if you listen to the American propaganda, it appears that those concerns could be well-founded because the new bloke, the son, Mustaba Khomeini, appears to be gay. President Trump apparently laughed quite loudly when he was informed this. It would pose a few problems, you would think, for the leadership of Iran if the new supreme leader is gay. Why? Because the previous Supreme Leader, and the Supreme Leader before him, and the Supreme Leader before him, and him, and him, and him, and him, have been hanging gays from buildings, from trees, and in the modern day, from cranes over the streets of Tehran. You might understand why his father was having a hard time saying, yeah, we put Mustafa in. He'd be fine. He'd be fine. And you got to feel for the bloke too. I mean, if he seriously has only got one leg left, it's going to make his time at Mardi Gras very difficult indeed. But he had a very tired leg, I would have thought. But duck and weave. That's all we can hope and intend to do at these times. Now, I've got a couple of videos that I'm thinking about playing you. I'm still umming and ahhing about one of them. So in the meantime, I will play you one that, yes, it does sound like septic tank propaganda. You are quite right, cunning linguist. I agree 100%. Now, we've had a lot of questions over the years, people saying, oh, show us these underground tunnels, show us these sacrificial areas, show us how things are hidden. This is particularly well hidden, but it is no dumb or anything like that. But it does appear to be a very unholy or holy chamber. It sort of depends. It could be used for either, I suspect. But one thing you can be left in no doubt of is the fact that it is very definitely secret. It is very definitely not to be found by anybody unless they are meant to know it's there. It starts a bit quickly, and just to explain it, the lady will open a panel of a wall. There is nothing to, obviously it's got a hinge there, some panel to access, steps down into this thing. That raises some questions for me as to some level of authenticity, because as you'll see, take notice of the stairs and the door that covers them. They would make an awful racket if you stepped over and walked on them, in high heels or something like that. Keep an eye out, but use some discernment. But this is very, very interesting. Push the button. So door opens, which is part of the wall. There's a wire and pulls up a floor panel. You can see there's no padding on it, soundproofing, but it allows you to come down a half level and then another half level. So there's some interesting things in hidden places, don't you think? Certainly, we know there is quite a lot of hidden rooms like that in New York City. In fact, one of them was found under a synagogue a couple of years ago, you might remember, along with a whole heap of blood-stained blankets and mattresses, child's mattresses at that. Have we heard too much? I don't think we've heard too much about that since then. Last night, I suggested that you might want to brush up on and learning a little bit about Judaism, about anti-Semitism, about Zionism. Good evening from Western Australia. Back at you, Zippy. Today, I've had a lot of phone calls from people asking me to explain Zionism, because the general thought is that it's a biblical reference, be it a Jewish one or a Christian one. Nobody seems to be quite sure. I can assure you that it is not a biblical reference. It is nowhere near that old. Zionism is a political philosophy. It is not a religion or a religious philosophy. In fact, it goes dead set against it. But I did find a video today with a comedian out of America who I do follow. He's a really, really funny guy. But he's done a little video that explains Zionism versus Judaism very succinctly and in a non-anti-Semitic way, I think. So if you've ever struggled with understanding what Zionism is and why it is different in every way to Judaism, have a watch of this. It goes for a little while, but it will certainly give you a very good idea of what it's all about.
No nukes coming in. Beautiful day. Yep, not yet. Hey, I've been seeing the Zionist stuff all over, but what's that mean? Zionism, is that a religion? Like a form of Judaism? Oh, no, it's not a religion, it's a political movement. Became an organized movement in the 1890s with major financial backing from the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds? Yeah, you know, the control banking, world government, secretive global control family. Those Rothschilds? Yep, those Rothschilds. Specifically, it was Edmund D. Rothschild that helped launch Zionism. So it's not the same thing as Judaism? No. What Zionism is runs in opposition to actual Judaism, which technically makes Zionism anti-Semitic when you think about it. But I don't think you're supposed to think about it because that creates problems for powerful people. Okay, so actual Judaism is not Zionism. Correct. Zionism violates the values of Judaism, so they're not the same and kind of very different. I thought Judaism and Zionism just went together. That's confusing. I think it's meant to be confusing. I thought Zionism was biblical. No, it's a political ideology from the 1890s. Judaism is the biblical one. Rothschilds, Zionism. So you're saying it's the same Rothschilds that most of us think control governments around the world? Yeah, same name, same bloodline. Huh. How would the Rothschilds control the U.S.? You ever hear of Israel? What do the Rothschilds have to do with Israel? They helped create it. They played a very pivotal role in the early development of a Zionist community in Palestine and the eventual creation of the State of Israel. So you think the Rothschilds might have some influence and control over something that they created? Yeah. Maybe. Huh, weird. So why are all the Zionists wanting this war with Iran? Well, what would you say is at the heart of all corrupt power? Well, I'd say the desire to accumulate more power and control at the expense of human welfare. I would agree. I don't know about that. I've been hearing a lot of Zionists on interviews lately, Lindsey Graham's doing a lot of them, saying we have to do the war with Iran to protect Israel because God wants us to. What have all parties throughout all religious wars and all of history said was their motive for killing and destruction? God wanted them to. And what about opposing sides in the same religious war? God wanted them to. Or do you think evil would corrupt actions? Suppose it might. But I follow some Zionists online and they don't seem like they have evil intentions. They seem like genuinely good people supporting what they think is good. Yep, I agree. So why would good people support something evil? Well, because of weaponized morality. Huh? Weaponized morality. It's when evil movements convince good people that the good thing to do is the bad thing. But they use lies, deception, and manipulation to convince people that the bad thing is the good thing. Weaponized morality. I don't know about that. Like, has that ever happened before? Do you know why German citizens turned in their neighbors? Well, probably because they just wanted to do something really bad and evil. No, they were told that's the good thing to do. Oh, yeah. Get this deadly shot to protect everyone around you. It's the right thing to do. Or you have to burn down buildings in downtown Portland because that's the right thing to do. Or we have to censor speech online because that's the right thing to do. And here we are. Most of them aren't bad people. They're good people that fell for it. Yeah, you know, I used to believe that whole climate crisis thing. Yeah, I fell for that one too. Yeah, people can just be stupid sometimes. But man, I get what you're saying with all this. But I just think if you look at the Bible and with the end times prophecy and Israel being God's chosen people, it just makes me think that what's going on with the war with Iran, there just might be something biblical to that. You're referring to dispensationalism, not the Bible. Dispensationalism doesn't come from the Bible. It's a radicalized literal interpretation of the Bible that comes from the Scofield Reference Bible, not the Bible. What's that? It's a book written and published in 1909 by a guy named C.I. Scofield in order to spread Zionism. And they got it to be very influential over Christianity with its new, well, made-up interpretations of the Bible. It's got a strong emphasis on literal Israel being God's chosen people, and it strongly pushes prophecy and end-time interpretations that aren't present in traditional biblical interpretations, but are very important pieces of Zionist propaganda. Well, what kind of new interpretations did this Scofield guy introduce? Well, before him, almost everyone saw Israel and church to be the same thing, as in God's chosen people are the ones that go to church. That makes sense. But Scofield comes along and draws a big distinction between the two, separating them, making it so Israel no longer includes churchgoers, and therefore churchgoers are not God's chosen people. So according to him, just people in literal Israel are God's chosen people. Like God is racist against everyone who's not from the state of Israel. Well, according to Scofield and Zionists, yes. And with the massive liberties he took with his new interpretations, it made the formation of the state of Israel in 1948 sound like biblical prophecy. Well, maybe God was speaking through Scofield, and Scofield was able to interpret God's word better than God knew how to speak it. Yeah. Maybe. But Scofield was an alcoholic, a literal criminal, and he abandoned his wife and child. So it could be possible that God was working through him. Oh, his work was also funded by wealthy Zionists, too. So yeah, I mean, it could be he was motivated by God, or it could be he was motivated by the money he was paid by Zionists to write what he wrote in order to spread Zionism. But yeah, I don't know. I just assumed it was from the Bible. Rothschild, Scofield. The guy never knew where Zionism came from. Yeah, I don't think they want you to know. What if the Rothschilds are truly doing the work of the Lord, and therefore Zionism is God's way? Do you know that Rothschilds are all over the Epstein files? Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. In an email, Epstein said, and I quote, "I represent the Rothschilds family." And there's a lot of other mentions too. So you don't think Epstein was doing the Lord's work either? Oh, what are you doing at this point? Yeah, I didn't think so either. I'm just throwing stuff at a wall. Peptides are short.
So there you go. JP Sears is the guy's name. He's got a great Facebook page and well worthwhile checking out. I've reached out to him. With a bit of luck, we might be able to get him on the show. Who knows? He's only got about 45 million followers, so the odds of him picking up my message probably isn't great. But stranger things and weirder things have happened after all. So I hope that explains Zionism and Judaism for you and why they are very, very different things. I think that will help a lot with people getting less confused about what is anti-Semitic and what isn't. I'm not sure that it'll help keep people out of jail, but we'll wait and see. There does seem to be a big push for people at the moment that are saying the wrong thing about Israel. I'm not exactly sure what the wrong thing about Israel is. At the moment, they're prosecuting a war that seems to be only for the benefit of Israel, and for whatever reason, they are being able to exercise a lot of influence over the United States of America. The world is finding that concerning, as evidenced by the lack of support coming from NATO partners and anybody else in the region. Australia, South Korea, those sorts of places. Pardon me. So Australia is probably having a reasonably pragmatic view of things at the moment. We are an island nation, and as I showed you last night, we are entirely dependent on the cargo ships of the world bringing to us everything that we consume, because we don't make anything here anymore. Now, we don't even make toilet paper here anymore, I'm reliably informed. The last Australian toilet paper factory was in Adelaide, and it closed down after COVID, I'm told. You remember when people were fighting for Dunny Roll in the supermarket aisles? It's coming back. Won't be just toilet paper. It'll be absolutely everything. You won't have to worry about fuel in your car because there'll be nothing to buy at the shops when you get there. So that should be everybody's main concern at the moment, not stocking up on fuel, stocking up on food, because there is every likelihood you're going to need it. I've spoken to people today who have variously 2 months, 6 months, 12 months of stock, stuff that has been kept and preserved perfectly. A lot of dry stock that has been kept in 20-litre containers that's been filled with nitrogen to get all the air out of it and kill anything that might. See, this is something people, preppers, new to the game a few years ago, don't fully understand until they go back in and need something. So they'll go and dive, oh, I've got some of that out in the shed, I'll go and get it. And they dive into a box that hasn't been opened in 3 years, and they find weevils all the way through the flour they thought they'd kept there. Now, the weevils didn't come in. The weevils have always been in the packet. Always. You just left them for 3 years and they've multiplied. So how do you get rid of them? Well, you pack all that sort of stuff in nitrogen, which is a bit of a to-do, but I think we have people in our chat that could give you some ideas on how best to do that, and it will keep all your foodstuffs preserved. Nothing will grow in it because there's no oxygen in it for it to get a foothold and grow manky. But people are only discovering that now. So if you've got a stockpile of stuff that you've got out in the shed somewhere, or you've got it, dug in a hole out the back, better go and check it out. You will also find particularly cans of tomatoes are apt to deform and possibly explode, depending on how hot you are in your part of the world and where you've stored them. I know from experience that these cans, explode is a strong word, but they'll split along the seam, and it's a bloody mess. So, Mount Gambier has a big toilet plant. Bloody decent. Thank you, Shane. Because there is so much wood Australia in Mount Gambier, Millicent, that whole area. Vince, in fact, used to work, if very big mills. He was a forklift fondler or something from memory. Yes, played around with tines. Yes, doing weird things. You see, yeah, like that. So he spent some time there. I don't know that he was a toilet paper roller. It's possible. But I'm bloody glad to hear that we do have a toilet paper production still in the country. I hope to God they can ramp it up to about 7,000 kilometres a day, because I've got a feeling that's what we're going to be needing. And they might be able to put a few more pieces on, that persons on, not pieces. That'd be good, employing a few more people. If you are a business person, if you've had a business previously, if you've made a bit of money and it's all held up in, investments or paper, and you actually care about this country, have a think about what manufacturing this country needs and how you might be able to help fund the beginnings of that industry again. I'm not saying that we're going to fund all industries again, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get a car manufacturing industry again? Wouldn't you like to be able to buy an Australian-made car at a reasonable price? For that, we would have to have agreements that anybody who was involved in the process had nothing to do with the unions, because it is precisely because of the unions, in my opinion, that we don't have a manufacturing industry in this country anymore, particularly a car-making industry where people were being paid many, many, many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to watch a robot pick up a nut and screw it onto a screw. That was their job, to make sure the robot put the nut on the bolt. And that was an $85,000 or $90,000 a year job back then, back in the 90s. So we were never, ever going to be able to make affordable cars for Australians. All of a sudden, oh shit, we've got to keep up with the BMWs and we've got to keep up with the Mercedes. If you get an Australian road, fall apart 3 years because they're just not up for it. Although these days a lot of car testing is done here, but back then it wasn't. But our cars were made for our conditions, and much better. You could get a spare part anywhere on the side of the road, big town or small. We need to get back to that. We need to get back to something that is useful from a family perspective, useful to a farmer perspective. Or bugger me, a ute. Maybe we can come up with a 4-door ute, a 5-seater, if you like, that is Australian made, that will go bloody anywhere, will tear the arse out of the gearbox of a Ford Raptor. Not that you need to tear the arse out of a gearbox of a Ford Raptor. I hear they just fall out by themselves. But, you know, you get the idea of where I'm going with it. So I shouldn't say that about Ford Raptors. I'd really love a sponsor, and a Ford Raptor would be a great one. I guess as long as the gearbox stays in it and works. Anyway, you get the idea. Bloody unions did destroy the car industry, made everything unaffordable, and they did it on the back of, our workers need to make more money. And then the unions would extort their workers to get more money. Oh, look at the great pay rise we gave you. You blokes at the meeting this week, everybody can give us $100 because we were good blokes. And then we'll be back next week for another $100 because we're good blokes. And look what we did for you. We got you a $100 pay rise every week. Doesn't matter that you're giving it back to us. Not sure that ever actually happened. Well, I am sure that it did happen actually, but the current CFMEU may operate differently. The former one used to play a lot of things like that. And the unions, well, I have no respect for unions because they forgot. They forgot, like Labor has forgotten, why they came into being. They came into being to protect the little bloke. They came in to give the person who isn't strong enough to have their own voice heard. And that's not a bad thing. You know, there are those of us who have big, loud voices and can be very brash and tell exactly what we want. And then there are those who don't have that ability for a variety of reasons. This is why unions take the top out of the nasty, angry ones that will demand whatever they want, and they give voice to the ones who are meek and mild at the bottom. So they fall somewhere in the middle. At least they were meant to. Thanks, Bill. Really appreciate it. Thank you, mate, for that $20. Thank you. I really appreciate it. But what do? Well, the unions get greedy. They get drunk with the power, and then they start exercising that power, ramping up the wages. Oh, it's $3.50 here, or it's $2.70 there, or we need to get another $11.50 a week, and we need another 3 weeks a year off. The demands became more and more outrageous, and rather than giving them time off, it became easier to accede, I guess, to the pay rises that they wanted. And then all of a sudden, you're looking at a shitbox 4-cylinder Ford costing $44,000 at the time. We probably think of it now as very cheap. But I remember an AU Falcon, that thing that looked like it had shark's teeth at the front of it. God, without a doubt, the ugliest Ford ever created on God's green earth, designed by an Australian, I believe, with American influence. That car, what was that, mid-80s when that came out? That was $44,000. The base model, I think, was $29,000. Whereas Toyota, I think, had a Camry or something similar at the time, you'd get for $16,000. And it came with electric windows, an AM/FM radio that was AM stereo from memory. Borg Warner, yep, they killed Borg Warner off. Magnificent manufacturing company. South Australia, known for car manufacturing. The glass, all the glass, VDO systems. did all the speedos and whatnot. It didn't matter for what flavour car, whether it was Ford, Holden, Mitsubishi, Toyota in the end. It didn't matter. They did the lot. And many, many South Australians owe their education, their house, their boat, their motorbike, and any other thing they own to the stability that those jobs gave them. And then they were ripped away because of greedy thugs in union overalls. I can't understand how unions have been allowed to get to this level of power. Well, the clearest example of how they get to that power. They corrupt the government. And in Labor's case, Labor, it is my belief that Labor deliberately or just naturally identifies people who are open to being swayed via other means rather than listening to the people. And that corruption just spreads deeper, wider. And all of a sudden you find the thugs are in your office dictating to you how life, the universe, and everything is going to go. And I think that's been happening in Victoria for a long time. That has been happening in Queensland for a long time. I don't think it's happening in Queensland as much anymore, but I'm told on some of the big build work sites around Queensland that the CFMEU is very quiet at the moment, where previously they have been standing over contractors on sites with wild and gay abandon. And that seems to have slowed down a little bit, according to at least one of the people I'm talking to who's a tradie and does a bit of work on that sort of thing. Building industry unions are still going hard. Yeah, that's probably the next demise in the industry. Well, I think you're going to find Cbus will go down. And if you have your money in Cbus Super, I wouldn't be putting it there. If you are in one of those industry super type things and that industry is all about unions, then I would be looking to start my own self-managed super fund very, very quickly. The smart people who work in mining, in the big industries, making really big money, these blokes all own, and ladies, all own self-managed super funds because they don't trust their industry super. They don't trust the unions because some of them are old enough to remember when the likes of Julia Gillard and her union boyfriend steamrolled their way into Boulder, Kalgoorlie, and wound up walking out with the Kalgoorlie Mines death fund. All the money gone, supposedly to be looked after by Gillard and then handed out to families of the bereaved once somebody's died on site. Never happened. All the promises that she turned up into town to make was all lies, and she and the boyfriend, whose name was Wilson too, from memory, absconded, never to be brought justice again. She did lose her job with Slater and Gordon, and there were some connections to that particular episode, but there were a lot of other things that she did with that boyfriend of hers, Wilson, that got her kicked out of Slater and Gordon as a partner. And that's saying something. In the 90s, to be kicked out of Slater and Gordon for doing the wrong thing, and she really did the wrong thing. She could have been responsible for the complete of Slater and Gordon with her unethical actions. Hide those actions to obvious. Of course, in a lot of contracts passed between government and Slater and Gordon, mob starts with black. They are the Labor government's lawyers of choice. So you know how much money they make a year out of them now, and you get a bit of an idea of how long they've been making it. Utter bastards. Utter bastards. Gillard gave $40 million to the bloody Clinton Foundation on our behalf. She gave a lot more than that. She gave $189 million, and then another $200 million she gave through the World No, it was through the UN she gave that and the Clinton Foundation. And from it, once she'd vacated Australian politics, she was given the chair of, a UN-based group that was all about education for women. This was a Trojan horse for the Gillard child sexual exploitation plans to be rolled out globally. Gillard was the one responsible for the demise, or at least the beginnings, of drag queen story time in our schools. Gillard was at the head of and responsible for the introduction of all the gender-neutral bullshit in schools. She filled the education unions with like-minded dykes that were militant in the nth degree to force through the gendered fluidity programs that they are now using and have been using for the last 10 years to make the lives of many of our children almost unlivable with the psychological abuse they've placed on them. And that bitch got granted a huge, huge paying job. I want to say it was over $500,000 a year to fly around the world for, I want to say it was 2 years, extolling the virtues of education in schools for kids, for girls in particular. And what did she roll out? The program that they tested predominantly in Victoria back in the day when the red-headed clown was in charge. And she has a lot to answer for. I can only hope that we get to a point of answering or making her answer it soon. And I do believe that will be the case. Very quickly, a couple of things that I want to bring to your attention. There is a cyclone up north. There are people that we know in the area of regard. So stay safe to those folks that I know in far north Queensland. This is going to hit over the weekend. It's going to be fairly strong, but it's going to go through an area over the Cape that is fairly sparsely populated. And with a bit of luck, there'll be no Aboriginal settlements that are torn apart or anything. And then you can see it'll head across the Gulf and head towards the Northern Territory, probably gain a little power as it goes along. Antic has come out today. He is making all sorts of noises. I think he probably has to. Because he doesn't seem to be getting much of a shout from his party in general, so he's eliciting all the promotion himself. Now, he's got a lot of questions about the Australian TGA, the historical terms of reference, particularly that were used for the introduction of COVID, but we are also looking at the World Health Organization controls over us in the event of another pandemic. And it looks like there is a TGA connection here. Now, the Therapeutic Goods Administration is, for the want of a better term, a World Health Organization committed consultant, which means that behind the scenes, there are conversations going on between the TGA, the Department of Health, and the WHO relating on to how we're going to roll out the next pandemic response and all the other bits and pieces. Now, the Australian people have made it very clear we do not want any involvement with this whatsoever. And yet, the TGA are still going through with it, and they can only be going through with it because the government is paying the bills on it and therefore are very, very keen to push. So the TGA don't answer questions or they don't give a shit. No, they don't. Malcolm Roberts has been trying, I don't know for how long, to get answers out of the TGA. Karl Stefanovic, I would have thought, might have more luck. He's been, well, he's got a bit of a bro show happening at the moment between him, Matt Canavan, and Gerard Rennick. I don't know whether he's trying to bring them all together and particularly trying to help Rennick come together with One Nation. Rennick is already working with smaller parties, and this is something I told you about was happening last year as well, and all got blown up because one nation came to the table and weren't prepared to bend or flex or do anything at all with regards to the other operators. And those operators were the Qatar Party, amongst others, the Nationals, and a few other minor parties floating around. Now, I think that they've got every chance of pulling something together, but right now, it looks to me like Carl and even Gerard Rennick sounds a bit committed to opening the door back up to one nation. It doesn't appear like any of the blockages that held them apart last year are now there anymore for Rennick. So who knows? We might see something interesting happen there. We could also see something interesting happen here. A Queensland Young Australian of the Year has been removed from his job, which is dealing with young children, and has been charged with 8 offences regarding to possession of child exploitation and pornography material. That's another southeast corner Queenslander. If you're sending your kids off to these, I don't know, maybe I'm just too old. Maybe I'm just wrong-headed, wrong-minded about all of this. But I'll be honest, if I had to walk a child into a daycare centre and I found a 20-something-year-old boy looking after toddlers or even younger, I would have questions. I don't know that I'd ask them there and then, but I would have questions. Like, what made you come to this sort of job? Not that there's anything wrong with that job. It's just not the kind of job you'd expect a 20-year-old bloke to, or a 22-year-old bloke to gravitate into. But it might not be right to ask those sorts of questions, is it? I could be doing completely the wrong friggin' thing, which I'm, reasonably good at doing. Speaking the wrong thing, Indian immigrants are calling for Punjabi lessons in public schools. It'd be more useful. No shit, Sherlock. There is an expectation that when you come to this country, you will be speaking English, not Punjabi. One of the reasons that we have schools is that you can learn to speak English at them. Preferably, you already come with a working knowledge of it, and if you're an adult, you can go to a night school class or a day school class if you've got time during the day and brush up on those English skills. If you're a kid, they tend to learn a lot more quickly, and immersing them in a school situation tends to, help them understand the language a little bit faster, I guess. Kids are fast learners. However, understanding the culture differences, well, yeah, not so much. During winter, understanding AFL or NRL is not going to be high on their list. You want to talk cricket, all good. Common ground. We know a lot about that. But other times of the year, Punjabi might be helpful. However, should we change the schools or the languages that are taught in schools? I remember when I was in school, you had a choice of Indonesian or French, and you only got French to Form 2. After that, you had to choose Indonesian. I don't know why. Maybe they thought we were all going to French Indonesia. No friggin' idea. So, look, I'm not adverse to changing it. We were told at some point we should all be learning Chinese. We should all be learning Japanese as well. That was a big one during the late 80s from memory. Oh, look, my daughter was born in the late 80s, so she was just going to school in the mid-90s. Oh, yeah, we're going to teach her Japanese. And they did for like grade 1 and 2. And I think she's probably as fluent as I am in it these days. Konnichiwa. That'll be about it. Kawasaki, Suzuki, Kamikaze. That's about it. Can't go much further, I'm afeared. Before I go tonight, I've got 2 last things to show you. This will be the first thing. If you have any interest and you are requiring a tent that goes into a trailer, I can help you out with one. Now, this is a bit of a rig. This rig is hand-built from the ground up. I know the bloke who owns it quite personally. The canvases and everything in it are top-notch, huge bit of room and associated other bits and 2 rooms in it. Ideal to go camping with the family and all that sort of stuff. $4.5 grand on it. If you're interested, let me know, and I will put you in touch with a very grateful seller who is looking to push it out. I don't think I've got anything left to show you tonight. I could just tell you that you really, if you haven't already heard and learned about it, I think you should go and figure out what kakistocracy is.
We all live in a kakistocracy, a kakistocracy, a kakistocracy.
Ta-da! And if you like kakistocracy, it looks exceptionally good on a cup, and it's a great conversation starter. Kakistocracy is a real word. It's about bad government, or the bad people in bad government. And that is what a kakistocracy is, a government made up of dickheads. And my lord, we got one of them. So if you'd like to be able to explain kakistocracy to your friends, buy them a coffee cup, buy them a stubby holder, buy yourself one and just show it to them. And you can do that here at merch.vofhq.com/shop. I'm not sure if Vincenzo has put up any other designs. There are a few things there. And I know that as soon as I hit the off button on this, we are going to sit down and make a decision on our cruise shirts. So for those of you who are coming on the cruise, well, you're probably not going to get a shirt. But if you want to, you've still got time. Let us know what size shirt you'd like for the cruise, and we will arrange it. It's going to be a very cool sort of a shirt. Look forward to seeing everybody on the cruise. And yes, I still believe you can get a bed on the cruise if you like. It is the Carnival Encounter on the 4th of May, leaving Brisbane, going to Early Beach and coming back on the 8th. So we'd love to see you there. You can rest assured the only dickheads that we will see there will be the ones driving around the deck. Yes, I said deck.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Let's rock!